Our next keynote is Michelle, who's shared her mic with me here to get us going. She's been in IT, oh God, 1970s? 80s? There we go. Just trying to remember. We had a discussion way back. It was 34 years? Okay. So, 80s. Late 80s, early 90s. 92. Yeah, and I'm failing bad. My dad would be upset with me. She has been involved. I've been involved with her in engagements from a client side several times. I found her very knowledgeable, her ability to ensure that we weren't overlooking the issues by having an over-complex approach to things, and her ability to ensure that we weren't missing the small details was phenomenal. I have found her to be an asset whenever we've had the ability to bring her in. I think it was normally under Fortinet at the time. The ability for us to be able to not miss the fine detail that we were asking a solution to try to fill. She has worked in OT, she has worked in IT globally, and she is our next speaker. Give her a round of applause while we transition mics.
Get going. My slides are presenting, but I don't see them presenting here. And we'll work on that to be able to get my slides presenting. And while we're waiting, I'll just ask a few questions of the audience. How many of you definitively find yourself in the IT side of the house? Raise your hands. How many of you are students? Graduate? I'm still a student at 56 years old, so it's lifelong learning is what I believe in. There's no question about that. We don't have that up yet. Okay, so third question: how many of you sit on the operations side? And now operations, I'm really referring to the physical operations of say downtown Calgary, oil and gas companies, those sort of things, right? So I like to call it operations, or I like to call it engineering, because when we start talking about IT and OT, one of the things that I want to challenge you guys on is I want to, through this presentation, I'm going to challenge you guys on our thinking from the perspective of security and what we're doing, and I'm going to tell you guys that I think we're going in the wrong direction. I have a friend, his name is Richard Steinen. He was a VP of Gartner. He left Gartner, he created his own analyst firm. He was the CMO of Fortinet at one point in time. And he runs an analyst firm called IT Harvest today. And from that IT Harvest expertise, we'll try a different USB-C cable. IT Harvest expertise, what he does is he tracks all the security vendors. Anybody want to take a guess at how many security vendors that we have in the market space today globally? A million, I like that one. We got a hand up there. You got an answer? Huh? No, security vendors, 3,600 security vendors. And so with that is that if I was an end user customer, and I am not, I'd have a hard time determining what I want to purchase and how I purchase it. And so what we all need to be able to do when presenting to our executive is answer the question of how secure are we? Do you in the room who have to report back to executive have confidence on being able to express in executive terms the security of your environment at any given point in time? Silence in the room is telling me that we're not on the right page. We are not able to communicate to our executive how secure we actually are. And so I love the fact that, Quinn, you talked about complexity and how I try to reduce complexity. Complexity is the enemy of security. I'm getting older. I've been a technologist throughout my entire career. In the next 10 years, I don't think that I'm going to be learning a lot more technology. I'm going to just be focusing on my core skill sets, presenting, those sort of things. And as we do that, or as I'm doing that, I'm doing it, one of the reasons why I'm doing it is that trying to keep track of security in itself is extremely difficult. Trying to keep track of IT is impossible. And that we need to be able to find better approaches. So a little bit about myself. I work for a company called IS Squared. You guys have never heard of IS Squared. They're headquartered out of California. Most of you may have never heard of IS Squared, I shouldn't assume. I've moved from Fortinet after 20 years of working for Fortinet. I started the operational technology team with a group of other people, about 3 people initially, to focus towards the enterprise security market space. And so what I'm going to start talking to you about today is we have to start thinking about the business and the domains of the business. If we don't understand the businesses that we're securing, we can't secure them. And what I find based off of my experiences is that based off of the customer sets that I've talked to, most of us actually don't understand our businesses. And that we need to be able to take time to educate ourselves on the business verticals, and look at that as lifelong learning. So relative to this, I'm going to talk about shiny object syndrome. How many of you feel that you have shiny object syndrome? I do. I bought a Jeep Wrangler in 2022, spent over $125,000 on it, just simply because of the fact that it was freaking purple. Right? I'm going to talk about my history and my expertise so you guys understand who I am and where I come from, and I'm extremely opinionated, but I listen. It's burgundy, sorry. My partner just reminded me. It's burgundy. I'm going to talk about the digital revolutions. You can't have an OT speech without digital revolutions. I'll talk about the operational technology trends. I'll talk about the enhanced Purdue model. How many of you heard about the Purdue model? Okay, so we've got a good handful of people from a Purdue model. It is a framework created in 1992 and has evolved over the course of time, and I'll talk about it from a non-technical perspective, and then I'll talk about it from a technical perspective. I'll talk about the enterprise cybersecurity challenges. When I talk about the enterprise, I'm talking about the entire business. I'm not just simply talking about the information systems, and I think that that's one of the areas that we're going wrong with information security management, is that we're forgetting all of the majority of the business by focusing towards IT and information and data alone. We have to actually look at the entire business. We need to align to frameworks, and I'm going to talk about NIST framework, and I'll talk about the interpretation that I see from the perspective of how deployments of NIST framework fail because customers start necessarily at the wrong spots, and that they need to be able to look at it and be prescriptive to their environment and adopting a framework. Talk about the technical enhanced Purdue model. Talk about culture. I'll talk about tools versus a toolbox, because I think that we're in the world of too many tools. We need to be able to evolve the toolbox, but then from that toolbox, we need to go from products to platforms. How many vendor reps are in the room today? I'm just raising my hand because I've been a vendor rep my entire career. Don't you guys find that interesting that the vendors spend an enormous amount of money to sponsor a show, and they don't sit in the audience, they don't learn themselves? So anyway, I'm going to stop picking on people. Contextualized risk management and understanding context. How many of you hear context being brought up in security? Yeah, you get a few people, but we don't get a lot of people in the room. Next year, the year after, I started talking about two-factor authentication since around 2005, and I kept going, next year is the year of two-factor authentication, and then I was always wrong. And eventually it caught on because of the fact that people were being hacked. And then I'll leave you with top 5 actions. So let's try to avoid the shiny object syndrome. Shiny object syndrome is really looking at it and adopting new technologies as fast as they're coming out. And I'm going to pick on AI at this particular point in time. Ask you guys questions. I'm going to deploy AI in my environment. How do I secure it? I don't know. And I'm a 32-year professional in security in this industry. So what happens in shiny object syndrome? We chase the latest trends. Yet, on the opposite side, I talked about basics like two-factor authentication, authorization. And in OT, many of our environments in Alberta don't actually authenticate the users. So why chase the latest trends when you're not even doing the basics? So we need to be able to think about doing the basics. We have frequent technology adoption. Oh my gosh, the company is allowing me to have budget to be able to spend money on technology, and then we forget about people, process, and culture along the way. And that we need to be able to put more focus towards people, process, and culture. And I'm telling you guys, as end user customers, stop buying technology. Stop buying technology and deploy what we're using today. I look at deployments. I worked for Fortinet for 20 years of my life, and I look at deployments of firewalls. I'll just give a few examples. One from SonicWall. Walked into a customer, the firewall's broken. 150 rules at the bottom allow all, any. Right? So what we need to be able to do is to start thinking about maximizing our investments of what we already have. Because we have shiny object syndrome, Michelle sometimes doesn't understand how to speak, and I love talking about myself in the third person because it really messes people up. It's all good. But we end up neglecting core systems. And from those core systems, then at that point, IT gets a bad name. Because systems are inconsistent. And that you notice here is that I focused on performance and availability. And when I start talking about OT, and that we have a cultural conflict between IT and OT, performance, availability, sustainability, availability becomes absolutely critically important to operational technology, but that's exactly the same thing that's happening with IT today, is that our systems have to be up all the time. Because we're distracting and it's like that shiny object, oh my gosh, I gotta take care of this, we're wasting resources and we're burning cash of the companies that we work for. How hard is it to get security dollars in your corporations today from the perspective of the executive management? I don't want to waste any of that money that I ever get. And so initial existing environments, existing initiatives, or achieving long-term goals are missed. The next thing is adopting a whole bunch of new technologies because we don't understand when we're buying it how it's going to integrate into the entire structure of what we're building. We then lack consistency, we lack cohesive infrastructure, and we lack manageability. And when we go to OT, my first iterations of OT is this. IT is not an engineering discipline, and I'm probably insulting most of the people in the room that are system engineers. OT is an engineering discipline. And in Alberta, there's a fight between the professional engineers and system engineers by saying that IT people are not engineers. I actually tend to agree with the engineering side of the house, and that we need to start doing engineering disciplines to be able to define our systems and availability of our systems. So with operational technology, there's less shiny object syndrome there. They do much more engineering for purpose of the solutions. And so with that, yes, shiny object syndrome exists, but it's not as bad within IT. What does shiny object syndrome do for most organizations, not just simply IT or OT organizations, but the enterprise itself? We create unrealistic expectations that we can't deliver on. And with those unrealistic expectations, we end up buying a product or a solution. Oh, I kicked it? Well, that wasn't me. I'm so sorry, guys. Hey! I've created unrealistic expectations by saying that I was going to display this today while talking to you. So we need to be able to strike a balance. In striking a balance, what I'm saying is that when we start thinking about the business, we need to think about the domains of the business. The engineering domain, the HR domain, the IT domain. IT is not the business. The business is everything else. We have to start thinking about what is the impact of operational resiliency on the business itself when we're securing the environment. So it's not just simply data that we're worried about. So in mitigating shiny object syndrome, we have to build a clear, concise strategy relative to the enterprise, not just simply IT security, OT security, and all of the domains of the business. So I started with this. How secure are we? Under attack, if you work for an oil and gas company, or you work for a company that is producing anything, can we continue to operate when we're under attack? We have ransomware on the OT side, we have ransomware on the IT side. Do we have the data coming from the operational side to be able to make the business decision so that the executive can say, hey, look, you know what, even though we're under attack, even though we have ransomware running in our environment, we can still operate. We want to be able to continue to operate, whether it be IT systems or OT systems, even under attack. How much risk do we have? We talk about security all the time, but we don't necessarily talk about risk. But we need to be able to have tangible, quantifiable risk to be able to understand indicators of exposure, how our systems are exposed to be able to reduce the attack surface and be able to protect ourselves. What qualitative risks do we have? How do we measure risk? How do we get risks out of our systems? And so I'm going to talk about it from the perspective of digital transformation. We all hear digital transformation. How many of you guys feel that you have a full understanding of what digital transformation actually is? It's kind of like when cloud came out, or application service providers, if I'm going way, way back into the 90s and early 2000s. I'm not sure what they are. How are we using data to understand risk continuously? So we had a cyber risk analysis, or CRA, presentation yesterday. I was a little confused because I always talk about TRAs, and the industry really talks about TRAs, threat risk analysis, and I'm like, well, maybe I'm a little bit behind. Maybe what we've done as risk professionals is reduce the scope, and therefore then we'll call it cyber. But threat risk analysis is really the risk analysis across the entire business, not just simply the cyber aspects of it. So where do I come from? I come from two different backgrounds. One is infrastructure. In the early 90s, I worked for a company called Microdrives. I sold hard drives. I was a huckster salesperson. I was just simply selling hard drives at trade shows as fast and hard as I possibly could. That closed down, and I then worked for Global, which was acquired by Tech Data. And I was a hard drive product manager, inventory manager, national distributor of hard drives. Why did I do this? Because I wanted to understand not just simply the sales aspects, but the inventory management aspects, the whole cycle that is required. I moved over to D-Link because I needed to get networking experience. So I ended up getting core networking experience, getting edge networking experience, and then I went, oh, hold on a second here. This layer 2 networking in early 2000, I went, oh, this is being commoditized. Where can I go where it is a market that's never going to be commoditized? And security was the answer for me. So for you guys, here is the evolution of your careers for the students. Don't leave this area, even though it's very tough. You're going to make the most money in your career by focusing towards this. And two, two things for me is that I'm hybrid. I'm a salesperson and I'm deep technical. Not as deep technical as I used to be, but those hybrid skills are what employers are going to look for. If you get that hybrid skills, you can ask for a hell of a lot more money, and I'm proof of that. From SonicWall, I went through 7 rounds of layoffs, and I went, wow, when is it going to hit me? And then as soon as I had that thought, then I got laid off. And I opened up Gartner's Magic Quadrant in 2003, and it was like, Forta who? Who the hell are these guys? And then I started in 2004 and worked for Fortinet for 19 years of my life. I'm very proud of the achievements that I've done there. I created and worked with 3 people that created the OT team, which represents 15 to 20% of Fortinet's overall revenue today. It's on track to be 50% of the revenue for Fortinet. So think about that. Operations security is as important, if not more important, than IT security. And then I've moved over to IS Squared because I started presenting like this to IS Squared's executive on the first call. He's like, the CEO is like, hey, can we hire you? I'm like, I'm really happy with Fortinet. And then some things changed, and then I wasn't as happy. Industrial revolutions. We had the industrial revolutions. We went from farming into manufacturing, and then we changed the way the world operates, and that we're in this modern world because of that. We then started the information revolution in the 1970s or 1980s, where we started to put computers into manufacturing processes. And now what we are is in the digital revolution. And so when you start thinking about this, is spreadsheet digital or analog? What type of process is it? We have to start thinking about processes. Use of spreadsheets and exporting them out of systems and then pulling them together, that's an analog process. is not digital in any way, shape, or form other than the fact that you're using a digital machine. You're basically moving it into a manual process. The digital revolution is moving everything into digital processes where we stop taking things out and bringing it into spreadsheets and using systems to be able to do that. I won't go through all of the industry revolutions, but the industry revolution that we're in right now is Industry 4.0 and 5.0 parallel working at the same time. Industry 4.0 was introduced in 2010. Industry 5.0 was introduced in 2020. Industry 4.0 is very interesting. Ransomware starts to occur after the introduction of Industry 4.0. Why? Because we're interconnecting systems that we've never interconnected before. So I work for I2. This is the first advertisement for I2, and it's the last advertisement for I2, really, which is we're digital transformation expertise. We have cutting edge solutions. We have comprehensive IT and OT security, cybersecurity expertise, and that we're worried about proactive security measures and being able to look at things from a holistic perspective of a platform-based approach rather than a product-based approach. So operational efficiency. Now the customers, for me, the end users are trying to become more operationally efficient to be able to have greater degree of profitability. Well, we have to use digital transformation to be able to become more operationally efficient. It's as simple as that. This slide here, I think, is one of the most important slides for you guys. If you're trying to get budget, this is the slide that you want to take a look at. As I'm investing in operational efficiency, Mr. Executive, my cyber exposure increases. And I'll talk to you why the cyber exposure increases. And so therefore then it's fairly simple. For every dollar that I'm putting into operational efficiency, I need money for cybersecurity because of the fact that I'm interconnecting systems that have never been interconnected before and I'm having a greater degree of risk. So, depending upon what industries you're in, financial services, healthcare, education, government, they're all going through digital transformations. And you see this, the offset of greater cyber physical risk is including business connectivity risk or continuous pieces. So from that, from an OT, manufacturing, entertainment, energy and utilities, retail are all digitally transforming. In the era of digital transformation, this came out in 2017 by MIT, and I absolutely, completely agree with this, which is instead of looking at it from perimeters, we're needing to look at how we're safeguarding data and people and physical across systems, devices, in the cloud. Here's the first really busy slide. And I have several busy slides, but this is the first of it. Upstream, downstream, midstream, corporate, and retail for oil and gas in Alberta. Upstream, midstream, downstream, corporate, retail. How do you secure this? So we divide it all up in the security industry, and I think that we should. We should divide it all up. We need to be able to look at it as each individual domain of the business and what are the needs of the business. So the domain owners of the business, and this is what Steve Biswanger always talks about, as a CISO, I'm working with the domain owners of the business to be able to determine what levels of security and risk that they need to have. And so therefore then it's the owners of the business that are responsible for making decisions on policy and procedures and all of that sort of thing from a security perspective. The CISO's office is there to influence and help them make better decisions. So with this, we're interconnecting all of these. We used to have what was called the air gap. The air gap that hasn't existed for 20 years. We'd air gap all of these systems, but now we're interconnecting them to be able to become more operationally efficient. And then at that point, we're starting to add in new sensors and actuators, and we're using new technologies to do predictive maintenance analytics and applications. This is the understanding the business and how the business is going. Security is behind the business today. It's the first time in my career that security is behind the business. The business is moving faster than security is. We talk about automation in security, and we don't really mean it. But the business, this is an automated business platform, and that the business is automating. So if the risk is continuous and the risk is agile, because we're changing the systems all the time, and they're interconnected, why are we not, as security professionals, proposing continuous security management and management across the entire infrastructure? So this is the manufacturing enterprise ecosystem for manufacturing. It becomes easier to understand this when you look at it from the perspective of how do I divide it up? How do I secure it? So this one's easier for me to state too. From supply chain all the way through to customer experience, we're interconnecting systems. And those systems, we'll talk about on IT, we'll talk about CRM, we'll talk about email. But I never hear an IT professional talk about the OT applications like manufacturing resource planning. And those are applications that we're running on the OT side of the house. And so with that is that we're now interconnecting all these applications. We're putting in sensors to sensor what is happening within the environment. We're putting in new resources to be able to create and get off the grid. And you look at the top, what we're doing is we're collecting data across the business. And we're collecting all of this business data. The opportunity for us is to actually connect the business data and the security data at the same time. But we choose not to do that as an industry, and I don't quite understand why. Because we have an opportunity to go deeply into the business data to be able to help us understand context to how the businesses are operating and how the applications are operating. Yet we don't take the opportunity to grab that data, and we don't take the opportunity to be able to say, hey, maybe I should be able to take a whole bunch of other data from that. We try to look at it from a simplified perspective. So how do we digitally transform, and what are the internal and external barriers to success? The internal barriers are regulatory frameworks, lack of standardization that I talked about earlier, inability to share information across the ecosystem, right? This is very predominant within Alberta. And then we have talent shortages that we blame on talent shortages, but the reality of it is that we need specialized talent to be able to take us to the next step, which is pulling all the data together and being able to make better business decisions by being able to have better security decisions. The disruptor, the external disruptor is the cyber threat. So if you're in a business that talks about digital transformation and they're not investing in cyber, you just simply need to pull this slide up and say, hey, look, this is what is problematic. Operational technology security trends. We're shifting to digital. We're physical and safety related. IT professionals, how many of you guys looked at security and safety as equal to each other? How many of you guys have gotten and talked to the safety managers of your corporations and understanding, Tim, I know you're going to answer every single one of these questions. So safety and security equal each other. And with that is that we have to worry about physical safety of people as much as we protect data. The problem is that, you know why the OT people don't like IT? Because we kill data all the time. Hey Farron, if you're working on my plant, can I kill you today? Probably not a good idea, right? We're looking at productivity and uptime. We're trying to increase operational efficiency. And then we're focused towards customer experience. How many of you bought a Tesla? None of us, okay. Okay, I saw one in the parking garage as well. So from a customer experience perspective, thank Apple for this, the Apple Play Store, that's the Google Play Store. I'm not an Apple person, but the reality of it is that we have instant gratification as customers today, and that we want to be able to enhance the customer experience. By doing that, we're interconnecting all the systems together. Product integrity becomes critically important. Where the product is sourced, how it's been sourced, and particularly in the food industries, is that I need to be able to do recalls. How many of you guys noticed that there's a hell of a lot more recalls of stuff? Why? Because we're interconnecting all of this together in the business. And so we need to be able to understand the business. And here's where I become a little bit more technical. And I know this is a technical audience, so I hope you guys can keep up with me because I'm going to go through this fairly quickly. The Enhanced Purdue Model Reference Architecture was created in 1992. It had 4 levels. We have multiple different levels of it today. The Purdue model was created in 1992. And I'll talk about the lower levels. This is the physical operations. In Alberta, it's pretty simple. Those are all the wellheads, right? There's a hell of a lot more to it than that, but it's the wellheads. We also censor those wellheads to be able to look at shock and vibration and other temperature so that they can do predictive maintenance analytics. And instead of sending trucks out on a regular basis, they can send them out when we feel that there's going to be a physical problem. The process control network is the local area network in IT terms to being able to interconnect all of the process control. The supervisory control is connecting IT and OT together and basically having converting it from a serial network into an IP network, and then being able to put controls to the physical in the environment. You'll see here now that I click the next click, it then shows the technologies. We need ring networks, which are serial networks. We need ring networks that are process control networks, and then we need firewalls at level 2 of the Purdue model. You'll notice that there's a high secure authentication boundary, and then between that, then we have level 3 and level 3.5. A lot of people will call this IT, but this is an OT data center, not an IT data center. The OT data center is the manufacturing zone, the management zone, and the DMZ between IT and OT. And really, where all of the applications for OT are existing is in level 3. That's where the applications exist. Then we start to move into the IT environment. I have to have IT resources on site, and I also have core IT services. So those are the enterprise zones, the IT enterprise zone, the local area network that we're used to, and then the DMZ and the DMZ services to cloud-based services. Now, the cloud didn't exist when the Purdue model was created, so we have level 6 and level 7. We have the internet, remote access needs. We then also have the cloud services from the perspective of industrial Internet of Things. When we start talking about securing IoT and IOMT and industrial Internet of Things, I think people start scratching their head. I'm not sure what to do with these devices. And the problem with that is that it breaks the Purdue model. It breaks the initial model, and at that point you'll see that the blue line is talking about data, and I'll go into this a little bit deeper if I don't run out of time. I have 445 slides, so I think I might run out of time. It's one of my favorite jokes that I make, and I need to reduce the heaviness of this slide because of the presentations, because of the fact that I was told that it's heavy, and then I like being able to inject humor, but I didn't have any humor in this presentation because it's a very serious topic. Enterprise operational security challenges, or IT challenges, are this. We have manual processes. In IT, as soon as you start taking things, exporting data into spreadsheets, those are manual processes. We have limited and partial visibility to the devices themselves, and once we gain visibility to devices, we actually don't understand the context of how the devices are communicating to each other or why. We lack operational context and business context. We look at the devices from the perspective of the inherent operating system, the logs, and all of that, but then we don't really question what is the user really truly doing on this device? What is this doing within the environment? So we need to be able to understand operational context to be able to secure it properly. Most customers, and I'll just suggest that this is the same in this room, the security vendors don't focus you towards attack surface management. You need to be able to focus yourself towards attack surface management to reduce the attack surface. And you need to be able to do that by understanding the exposures that your environment has internally and externally. We then have compliance to regulations and policies. And what I found, and this in particularly across Western Canada, is the businesses are siloed. Digital transformation means that we get rid of the silos, but the businesses are siloed, and the GRC people don't talk to the security people. The security people don't talk to the networking people. The networking people don't talk to the application people. They all hate each other in business. And I'm sure it exists within your environments as well. And what I'm trying to say to you guys is as we become more digitally efficient, we need to be able to communicate, and that's why programs like B-Sides is critically important to me, and that's why these people, you people in the room, you people, that sounded great. Hello, my name's Don Cherry. So let's move on from that. Safety and performance are a high top priority. Safety of data. Think of data from a safe perspective. How safe is your data? Not how secure it is. Safety of human life. How many people have died on the plant or the shop floor? And then multi-vendor, multi-generational, inherently insecure. We can't secure it because we don't know how to secure it. Well, that's not the right answer. We need to be able to figure that out, right? So I'm going to quickly go through this. Frameworks and regulations and compliance. The key thing from a framework and regulation, I don't believe in snapshot in time TRAs anymore. TRAs need to be continuous. We need to have continuous threat management. And in 2008, the Obama administration made HIPAA as a HIPAA, which is for Healthcare Protection and Portability Act. they made it mandatory that they do real-time TRAs in 2008. So as an industry in 2023, we need to start thinking about how we're doing threat risk analysis on a regular basis and being able to report back to the executive what risks that we have. Manual processes need to be able to be converted into digital processes. We need to ingest frameworks. So if anybody is building frameworks, and I've worked on a few frameworks, the output is usually a PDF. It's a huge amount of reading. And then, but it needs to be converted into digital so that I can take the framework, digitally bring it in. Because I've worked with global multinationals, and the problem is you have 25 different frameworks across the globe, and if you're a global multinational, you probably have to touch every single one of them. And so that's true of the downtown Calgary oil and gas companies. You have all of these different frameworks, but it's very hard to interpret. You need to be able to apply the frameworks from the perspective of your environment. Global standards are required, those sort of things. So, governance, risk, and compliance. We waste resources and we have after-the-fact thinking. Oh, hey, Mr. Firewall guy, I need your logs. Oh, well, we got rid of them. Right? Those sort of things. From a process perspective, we do things from a manual perspective, and we need to be able to interconnect and being able to have that communication. So I'm gonna go through this, move over to the NIST cybersecurity framework. How many of you guys adopt NIST? Probably should be the one that's the most in this room. I'm not gonna go through all 5 of these, but I'm gonna go and say this. Where do you start? Right? And most go, oh, level 1. Well, that's great, I need to identify. And they never get to level 4 or 5. They get to identify, detect, protect. But then respond and recover is left. And then people like Adam make a hell of a lot of money. Adam's an incident response person, right? So on the opposite side here is what I'm saying is this. Management and recovery, managing and optimizing is critically important, and that's actually where we should start. Because once we understand management and optimizing is the most difficult thing that we need to be able to do, then at that point, you know that shiny object syndrome relative to technology, it goes away. And the reason why it goes away is because of the fact that then once we understand our environment, we can then understand what technologies we need to deploy to secure our environment. And identity, so level 1 and level 5 are the areas that I would start, and then at that point I have a cost understanding based on the controls required, and I can then let the executive management know definitively what it's going to cost me to be able to secure the rest of the environment. With that, cybersecurity is hard. But if I start with level 5 and take on the most difficult thing, I then have decreasing levels of cybersecurity expertise as I'm going down the Purdue model rather than up the Purdue model like the NIST model. As I'm going down the NIST model, I then can select the technologies, and I don't have the technology spawn that I have today. Are you guys ready? Are you ready? Yeah. I have till when? 9:20? I have till 9:20, right? Yeah. How many of you guys want to stay a little bit longer? I don't know. This is the enhanced Purdue model from the perspective of it being a little bit more technically accurate. And you'll see the technologies on one side, you'll see what it looks like from an implementation perspective, and on the right-hand side, what you'll see is that you'll see the data and data analytics side. And the data and data analytics side is the area of where management and manageability becomes. And if you see at the top of it, enterprise analytics, there's SIM and there's SOAR technologies, and I'm sure you guys can't read this, and I will gladly send you a copy of this. There's no problem with that. You'll see there is that we need a cybersecurity management system, or CSMS. How many of you guys, is that terminology new to you, a CSMS, cybersecurity management system? Yeah, it would be new to most of you guys. IEC 62443 defines that. That's actually what Purdue model is. And what it says is that we need to be able to have a cybersecurity management system to be able to manage everything downward. Well, that's what I just said about the NIST framework, and then we need context engines. Contextually, do you trust the neighbor beside you? Do you know what they're doing? That's what we need to answer. Now I'm going to go through 400 slides to get to the end. Cultural change, tools versus a toolbox. We need a platform versus a product Product and a platform-based approach. We need to look at things from a platform perspective. Google, Microsoft, Fortinet, Cisco, Palo Alto are all building platforms. We adopt those platforms, and then at that point we adopt a few different platforms and integrate. That's what we integrate together. Contextualized risk management is really identify the organization's assets. Now I'm going back to the NIST framework. Identify the asset vulnerability. Now I'm starting to sound like everybody else. Apply the policies to the business impact and the vulnerabilities, and then infer what mitigations need to be taken. I need to be able to understand that I can't always patch. IT, let's get out of patching. I know that sounds crazy, but what if we never patched again and we built our systems resilient to a point where we can protect those systems without patching? That's what OT needs to do. Why don't we start thinking about how OT operates and then look at it and say, hey, look, you know what? They're responsible for human life. I don't hear about killed people on the production line very often, but I certainly hear about ransomware all the time on the IT side. Applying threat modeling scenarios to evaluate risk across the organization. Being able to represent back to people like Tim and the CISO and the executive group, how much risk and how much quantitative risk do I have? From that, then at that point, allowing the executives to be able to make the decision from the perspective of this business change that we're going to do will impact us in this way from a risk perspective, and therefore then we can either make that decision, we can understand, hey, you know what, we're going to understand that there's risk, but we're going to make it because it's a business decision, because it's not one size fits all. And then discover the asset connectivity and understand the topology, being able to look at it from a visual perspective. So top 5 actions: build an operational technology, information technology, risk and security program integrated together with safety. Deploy a cyber physical and cybersecurity management system that gives you continuous risk management. Improve security by understanding risk availability and security gaps. Continuous involvement of stakeholders and domain owners. Having continuous risk modeling and operate safely with context. Understand how we're being able to make business decisions. The key thing here is this. There's not a product on the planet that does this today. I mean, Tim and I would discuss Archer is probably one that would potentially do this, but you don't, I'm not gonna say anything about a vendor, but it's very, very difficult. But this is the road that we're on in the next 10 or 20 years. In fact, this is where we should be right now. And I thank you very much for your time. And I'll leave you with some slides on who IS Squared is. And if we have, you know, anybody want to throw one tough question? And if not, oh yeah, there we go, perfect.
Your company is IS Squared.
IS Squared, yes.
Does it get confused with IC Squared?
It does, it does. And I'm a fellow with with what's called CSA, and their lettering also kind of gets confused with it as well. And so, but the nice thing about it is that it's nice because IS Squared or ISC is well known. So therefore, then it's a good thing. Thank you very much for your time. The one thing I will leave you with this for the professionals in the room. I'd love to be able to come out and do this presentation and discuss it in depth. For the students in the room, I'm about giving back. When I started in the industry, I was 20 years old. I had the gray beards. We have a few gray beards here today. But the gray beards imparted knowledge to me. I need to be able to impart knowledge to the next generation. So please, always reach out. Thank you very much for your time today.